Hello, welcome to this edition of the umgoblue.com podcast. This is Phil Callahan along with
Clint Derringer.
And we're going to break down Michigan's dominating 63-3 win over Central Michigan.
It's designed to be an explosive offense. It's designed to be an up-tempo offense. And it is, you don't know where the football's coming from. You can get reverses, you can get, any different kind of short throws, which are just long runs. There's a multitude of runs from gap schemes to zones, to inside and outside zones. There's a robust screen game, which you didn't really see today. So it is a very hard offense to stop. And I understand what the next question is going to be. We thought in Oklahoma we would take the air out of the ball because they're an air raid offense. And we're not taking the air out of the ball ever again. Not with this guy and taking the snaps.
Well, Clint, what'd you think about that one?
Well, that's about as clean as you can look in a football game. We in our preview podcast, we said they had to look the part. They had to look dominant. They had a big advantage on paper. They had a big advantage in size and strength and recruiting talent and all of that. And you got to turn that into a big lopsided win. And Michigan did that. Played pretty well in all three phases. Still a little bit of an adventure in special teams sometime, but any time that you can play an entire Division I college football game and the punter doesn't have to get onto the field, you know that your offense was humming. And it was good and from all angles. The run game was productive, 50% success rate, even after taking out the garbage time. Bryce Underwood, again, looked like he was in total command, certainly much more comfortable. There was a really good chemistry and rhythm between Chip Lindsey and the play calling and getting Bryce rhythm immediately into his comfort zone. So everything that we said we wanted to see, they did that and looked awesome. The defense finally looked like they smothered another team. Still gave up a couple third down conversions. I think on 6 for 15. Central was on third down, so not quite as dominant as maybe some other performances that we've seen, but certainly right in the realm that we expect to see Michigan's defense. So it was all in all great day, beautiful weather, and shout out to my 10-year-old Bo Derringer. Got to go to his first game and got to enjoy a big win. So that was great.
And Michigan dialed up a lot of action in his in front of his seat, so I hope Bo appreciated that.
Yeah, he loved it. He got to see our photographer Dell on the field. Hung out with my brothers, his uncles in the bleachers, and got to bring a buddy along too. So it was all in all a great day.
So when we go to the scoring breakdown, Michigan scored 14 points in the first quarter, 21 points in the second quarter. Central answered back with their lone points of the afternoon with a field goal. Michigan scored 14 points in the third quarter, 14 points in the fourth quarter, for a final of 63-3. And if my complaint last game was that the offense reminded me of last season, my jubilation this game is we didn't see anything like this last year. And I think, and of course, we need to keep in perspective that it was Central Michigan, but just, man, the points came in bunches. And, you had Justice Haynes with a 2-yard touchdown rush, Samaj Morgan catching a pass for a 32-yard score, Bryce Underwood running for a 20-yard touchdown, Andrew Marsh running for a 23-yard touchdown. I mean, and that's just basically heading into the second quarter, right? Jordan Marshall scored, to finish the second quarter, scoring for Michigan. Then Jordan Marshall scored again in the third quarter. Bryce Underwood scored again in the third quarter. And then Michigan brought in backups, and they scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. So, again, just everybody scored. Great time at the big house. Clint, what were your thoughts when you looked at the difference in this offense compared to what we saw last week versus Oklahoma?
What's the number of reps? They ran 80 plays on the day. Each quarter had between 18 and 22 plays per quarter, right? And Michigan just has not been able to do that. Certainly going back through last year, but even before the national championship season and some of the struggles that we saw in 21, 22, and certainly before the COVID season, sometimes the offense would just get bogged down and could not move the chains and string any rhythm together. And as an offensive coordinator, a play caller, it's hard to kind of jab, jab, jab and set up your haymaker. It's hard to get into a play calling rhythm when you've only got 3 plays to call. So executing on those early downs, certainly, again, we saw some run plays on first down that were able to pick up 5+ yards. And it seemed like Chip Lindsey was able to keep all pages of the playbook open throughout the entire game. And that is what made the biggest difference in how the game felt. I mean, can't say enough great things about Bryce Underwood. Definitely, you could tell that he was coached this week on his reading of coverages on pass plays. Look, if you see something you don't like, or if you see a lane and you can pick up positive yards with your legs, then go. And that helped him be decisive. He made more quick decisions. And I think when he throws with confidence and throws in rhythm, and if there's any doubt, go ahead, pull it down and go ahead and run the ball. It looked like he was in control of his own fate, and he looked like the dominant athlete out there. And that's all of that is tied together. And like you said, opponent caveats still apply. SP Plus has this as the lowest ranked team right now on Michigan's schedule. So they were supposed to do this. But we've seen other Michigan teams in recent history. They were supposed to do this and did not. So you got to play the team that's in front of you. And when they play well and execute, it's clear that the ceiling is much, much higher on this Michigan offense.
Bryce talked about in the post game his different approach to running the ball.
Watched our film a lot, go over our loss, of course, from last week. Just realized how much of a difference I can make if I use my legs way more. So whenever the opportunity presents itself, like I said last time, I present it.
It'll be interesting to see, again, versus Central. I'm not sure Bryce would have been nearly as successful against Oklahoma on the road, but man, he looked good.
When a quarterback can extend a play, you're a defense. You play 2 plays really well, and you think you're getting off the field, and this kid extends the play with his legs. Those things are heartbreaking for defenses. I mean, it takes a lot out of you, and it breaks your spirit a little bit. And he's he's gifted. I mean, y'all saw that, but he is so gifted. I'm glad we got him.
And it looked amazing. And like you said, you got to play the game on the schedule. And, nothing against Central, but man, this was a beatdown. And the other interesting thing is Michigan did not let up. Okay. We had, I think I counted 9 or 10 offensive linemen being rotated in. And even in that fourth quarter where we've seen really good Michigan teams kind of sputter when they start putting the second and third string in, they just kept going. So it's really interesting to see not only how good the offense is with Bryce at the controls, but how having to defend him for 3 quarters just wears the opposing defense down. And definitely we're going to have to see if that continues against, Big Ten opponents. But I like what we saw so far.
Yeah, a couple other things on the offense specifically. I think it can't go unstated that Marlon Klein returned to this game. He was not, he got 0 snaps against Oklahoma. I think he made a big difference. There's the proverbial security blanket, right, for quarterbacks is their tight end, and I think Marlon Klein is Bryce's favorite target, and I think that there's a comfort level that he brings as well, in addition to being home instead of on the road. He's also a really, really good blocker at the point of attack. Some of the down blocks that we saw from 17 at the edge of the line of scrimmage, really, he gets guys moving when he gets his shoulders square and gets all the way into a defensive lineman that may be slanting or angling. He really can drive them down almost all the way to the center and really can make some gaps along the edge. So he made a big difference. And then not only his blocking, but Michigan was missing their starting two guards. And that was the main reason for consternation for me. I never thought that Michigan would be in danger of losing this game, but I did expect the offense to look, a little bit problematic, especially on the interior with those guys missing. And there was a noticeable difference in this game when you even compare it back to the New Mexico game in week 1, when the starters were there. They were getting movement on the inside. The duo plays, those double teams, those offensive linemen were coming off of the initial double team and getting shoulders on linebackers and making bigger runs. And we saw a little bit of outside run game, both guards pulling around the end on kind of a pin and pull look, where Justice Haynes went the distance and it got called back by a hold by a wide receiver, and Jordan Marshall busted one outside for a touchdown that got called back for a hold on a wide receiver. So inside, outside, the run game looked great. And a big part of that as well is making the defense account for the quarterback run game and making the defense account for the deep shot. First snap of the game, Chip Lindsey fired the ball 50 yards down the field, almost intercepted. But I told you right away when it happened, I said there's a lot of value in that incomplete pass, because now those safeties can't start sticking their nose up into the box yet. They have to respect the fact that there's a deep threat. And the run game certainly was the beneficiary of that.
And to that point, all last season, when Michigan was struggling with the passing game, especially the long passing game, I had wanted exactly what you said. Like, hey, just air the ball out to show them that you might do it, right? And of course, we didn't see that much last season. And when Bryce fired that ball long, that was just an appetizer of things to come. And I'm looking at the stats, and Michigan got 616 yards of total offense. I mean, that's just an immense performance. And again, 381 on the ground, 235 through the air, and just crushed Central. I mean, Central only had 139 total yards, rushed for 79, threw for another 60. And, the amazing stat, which you pointed out when we were prepping, is that Michigan didn't punt. So you look at the stat sheet, and all the punt stats are 0 for Michigan. And that's just a beautiful thing, just an amazingly beautiful thing, and that you very rarely see. We did some digging, and we're going to continue to dig to find out when the last time that happened. But that is really something that sticks out when you look at the stats.
Yeah, and I think my last thought on the offense, you mentioned before that they didn't let up. Michigan was up 35-3 at halftime. The third quarter stats, Michigan runs 22 plays for 187 yards. They got 190 in the second quarter and 187 in the third quarter, scored another 14 points, and the defense held Central 8 plays for 10 yards in that third quarter. So if there was any question about whether Central was going to be able to kind of hang around or make it look respectable, they really put their boot down in the third quarter coming out of the locker room, and that was it. And I think we heard some of the emotion about why the players were playing so fired up, and kind of a win one for Sharon Moore kind of an attitude. And I would imagine that that's part of what they talked about in that locker room, because they came out with their hair on fire in the third quarter, and that was it. They sealed it up.
Jordan Marshall, no stranger to running the ball, was also really impressed with Bryce.
I think it helps the whole offense when we have another layer to our offense. We have the run game. Bryce can scramble and throw the ball on the run, and he can also throw it. And to have all those things, and for him to be comfortable doing that, and he took some hits and gave some hits. Like, that dude, he can run some guys over, and I'm just excited. Like, watching him on the sideline, you're like, this kid he's going to be a monster. And he's just getting better and better as the week goes on. And for him to bounce back like he did from last week, it shows his heart, his character, and who Bryce is. But that kid can run the ball and throw the ball, and I'm just excited to see what we can do. And yes, it helps me run the ball. It opens up gaps. He's pulling defenders off the backside of runs. So yes.
So you had Bryce, just, the Swiss Army knife of weapons. He can throw it, he can run it, he can hand it off, making much better decisions. Seemed to be able to make the decision to keep the ball. And, when you're listening, so you mentioned Sharon was not on the sideline for this game. Interestingly, while we're talking about the offensive line, Biff Poggi told us that Sharon spent a lot of time in the run-up to this game, when he still could coach, focusing on working on the O-line.
Sharon spent all individual this week with the offensive line. I mean, he was the best offensive line coach in the country for 2 years. He won the back-to-back Moore Award, and in my opinion, the best coordinator too. So he got over there and kind of started looking at things, and I think that that will continue when he gets back. And I think it's really important for our football team. We played, I think, all of our offensive linemen, and there was not an instance in the game, which is rare, where our second and third units were not knocking people off the ball. And I think that's really impressive, and they're very young. It's a young football team, highly talented and very young.
And that'll be the quote where he talks about it. And, good news and bad news. I'm glad that Sharon spent time with the offensive line. It's one of the things that I had said last week in our podcast. I'm like, Sharon really needs to get together and fix the O-line because, again, he's an O-line coach. He's an offensive coordinator. The calling card of this team should be a strong offensive line, and it was pretty shaky the first 2 weeks. So to see not only two new guards in the mix, but a pretty dominant performance. Now, in my mind, it begs the question, what's going on when, Sharon's not there spending time with the offensive line? I mean, it's great that he can, but he shouldn't have to, right? So we're going to be watching the offensive line for, the next couple games and throughout the season. But we will take the win and we will take the good news moving forward. I think the other thing that struck me was Jordan Marshall talked about how the difference between after losing to Oklahoma this year and losing in their second game last year.
Last year, after we lost week 2 last year, and it was kind of a dividing factor with our team, and guys kind of did their own thing. And we had a player-led meeting this week, and the message was to come together. We have to come together. We have to be stronger from this moment. And a lot of these guys are like, we're going undefeated. We're winning everything. So we lost. We can still win out the whole rest of the season, and that's what you got to focus on. You got to focus on one game at a time, and that's what we're going to do. We got Nebraska coming up. We're going to enjoy this one tonight. And then we're going to get back there tomorrow and start studying, start watching film. And it's a different energy now. We're in Big Ten play, and I'm excited to go up there and prove that we can do what we did here on an away stage and walk in and take over their trap. Like that's the main goal, is to walk in there and take over their way. They wear red, and we don't like that. So we're gonna go in there. We're gonna be physical, throwing the ball, running the ball. Defense is gonna be physical, and I'm just excited. It's Big Ten play, and a lot of the guys are gonna be jacked up because it's time to go.
And it really struck me to hear that from a player, right? That's usually the kind of thing you hear midway through the season, maybe at the end of the season, they point back. But I thought it was really interesting that they just said, hey, last year things got off track, and the team is making a decision to not let that happen again now, right? So it's going to be interesting to see moving forward, can they sustain that, right? Um, you know, Jordan Marshall also talked about, hey, we want to have balance.
It opens up the run for us. So I'm excited that we're getting this going, and Bryce is slinging it. He's pulling the ball and taking some and running some. But it opens up for me, Justice, Kuz, whoever's in there. It opens it up for us. So I'm excited that we're getting this going, and just like Marsh said, this is going to be a big part of our game throughout the rest of the season, and it has to be. We have to be able to throw the ball because it helps the box. It makes the box less cloudy. So just to make sure that we can have a balance of both is something that we're definitely striving for the remainder of the season.
It seems very clearly that, and I don't know if it was a question of the players being emotional because Sharon Moore wasn't there. Usually there's a little bit more reservation when they talk, but it was really good to basically have that insight opened up to how the offense was changed, how their view was changed by this players meeting. And, it's interesting too, because, the media asked Biff Poggi, how do you coach Bryce?
Sharon really wanted to open things up with him a little bit when he felt it was the right time to do so. And, he's young and you want to kind of scale him into it. And Chip Lindsey really took that mandate and I think did a great job. Bryce is just, so it was a plan to get him using his legs a little more, but, I have a Labrador Retriever that could coach that guy. He's unbelievable.
Poggi's not taking any credit. He's just, letting players play. So, he also talked about that, Sharon gave them a very detailed game plan, which he's doing everything he can to execute. So just very interesting game. Again, I don't know what else to say. When we're looking at the first three games, it's like we've seen the best Michigan play and the worst Michigan play. And, it'll be interesting to see how that progresses as we continue on through the schedule.
Yeah, and you got to look at the strength of the opponent as well. New Mexico in the opening week. Again, I said that I thought that they would kind of climb up the rankings a little bit through the rest of their schedule, and they snuck up and beat a Big Ten team, in Pasadena, beating UCLA, and in a game that was not close or was never close. So that team's going to keep getting better under Jason Eck. We'll see what Oklahoma can do in their SEC portion of the schedule. That's probably the best defense that Michigan sees until the end of the season when Ohio State comes up. And Central was kind of the get right, game, but they've put together a couple good performances, beat San Jose State on the road, kind of a surprising outcome, and stood toe to toe with Pitt and came into the Big House and gave it their best shot, even going for it on fourth down. Once it got to 21-0, Central kind of gave it this is it. We got to pick this fourth down up here to have any chance. And when they didn't get that fourth down play, I think Central knew that it was basically over, and that's why they kicked that next field goal just to make sure that they didn't put up a goose egg. So I'm really, really interested to see kind of how this translates into the Big Ten season for sure as we go from the first quarter of the season to the second quarter of the season. But I think there's a couple things defensively that were notable. Again, TJ Guy doesn't play a snap in this game, but was not on the injury report. So interesting to see what comes out this week. If somebody asks the question about his participation, would be certainly
Clint,
useful.
They did ask the question in availability, and what Biff said was that nothing was wrong with him. I'm taking that with a little bit of cynicism, and that they had purposely game planned to go with larger players to offset Central's attack, and that TJ's available. Now, I don't know how to take that. When you look at the availability report, okay, and it was a cast of thousands playing in this game, and somehow he didn't get in, right? I'm a little skeptical, right? And that's the kind of thing where, we may find out in a week or two that he was banged up or had something else going on. But again, when you look at Michigan's participation report and many, many, many legions of players played both on offense and defense, that's weird for me. Okay, so
right. And definitely a grain of truth there with what Biff Poggi says, though, because they certainly did shift their defensive alignment. Now, maybe it's kind of a chicken and the egg situation. Was it because Guy wasn't available that they reworked how they wanted to align their defensive unit? Or is it like Biff said, because they wanted to realign their defensive unit, that Guy saw fewer snaps? But it looked to me like they shifted to either a 4-3 under or just straight up moved Jayshon Barham to the edge position. He played as a stand-up edge player for the majority of this game and was really, really disruptive, of course. There were times where Central tried to pull guys to block him, and those guys couldn't get to the spot fast enough to even touch Jayshon Barham. There was one play, I think it might have been the first offensive snap for Central, where they leave Barham unblocked as kind of like an option play a little bit. They want to draw the end to the quarterback, and the quarterback was trying to slip a little dump off pass right behind him in the flat. And Barham closed so fast that the quarterback never even had a chance to get rid of it. And after they lost 8 yards on the first snap, they were negative in total yards for almost the rest of the first quarter. So he was a total game wrecker from that edge position. Now we'll see whether it was a calculation of just wanting 3 linebackers on the field, which is what we saw with Barham on the edge and Jimmy Rolder playing linebacker next to Ernest Hausman in the starting rotation. And then eventually Hausman, who was questionable for the game, kind of got some time off, and we saw Cole Sullivan in the middle. There are variations of the 4-3 that kind of put that guy up on the line of scrimmage. So it'll be interesting to see once Michigan goes against another team that spreads the ball out more, wants to pass a little bit more than Central does, whether Barham is back at that linebacker position or if he indeed has been added to the edge rotation. So something to keep an eye out on there, because his presence was felt through this game without a doubt.
And Biff Poggi is a big fan of Barham.
On Jayshon, yes. The update, he might be a superhero. We're doing a DNA swab right now, but he could be. That's the update. He's fine.
Biff mentioned it. He actually coached him in high school. So there's a lot of familiarity between Biff and Barham, and he's a big fan. when I go back and look through the stats, right? Rushing, your leading rusher was Bryce Underwood. Okay. 9 carries for 114 yards, 2 touchdowns. What a night and day difference from last week, right? Justice Haynes, 14 carries for 104 yards, 1 touchdown. Jordan Marshall, 10 carries for a mere 52 yards, but 2 touchdowns, right? And, you look at the passing stats, Bryce Underwood, 16 for 25, 1 interception, 235 yards, 1 touchdown. And then you had Samaj Morgan being the leading receiver, 4 receptions for 69 yards and a touchdown. Then Hogan Hansen, 3 receptions for 43 yards. Donovan McCauley, 3 receptions for 36 yards. And Channing Goodwin, 3 receptions for 33 yards. It was interesting that although Marlon Klein played, he only had 1 reception. So, like you said, still maybe working through something there. One thing that we talked about in the preview podcast was how much of a factor the team playing for Sharon was going to be, right? And, you can play both sides of it. Hey, these guys play a lot of football and you don't know how much the rah-rah stuff is going to get them motivated. They said before the game, they said after the game that it did motivate them, right? And Jordan Marshall had this to say.
Yeah, it's motivational just because that's our head coach, and I know any of us at this table would do anything for him. That's why we came to Michigan, to play for a guy that has the passion he does for this program. And it means something when you step out there and your head coach isn't out there. And just the desire and fire you want to play for him, for his family, because he would do he's at home watching the game. He would do anything to be out there with us this weekend, next week. So I think a lot of the guys got emotional knowing that he wouldn't be there, but we had to play for him and set the tone for him. And I think our guys did that well, from the starters to the guys that came in later in the game. Everybody executed, and we played a full football game.
It's interesting because Biff Poggi talked about it.
He said, I don't want you playing for me, and I want you playing for yourselves, and I want you playing for the coaches and for Michigan. And as soon as he walked out of the door, I said, we love them, we all work for them, but we're not listening to that. And so they were locked on for him. And it was a very, at dinner last night, it was a very tearful, a moment, because the players brought him up and gave the break, had him give the break. And at that point, he left, and he was a wreck, but so was everybody else in there. But so it had a lot to do with Angelique.
So I think it was a factor. Also, I mean, let's be honest. We've talked about this before. It's a big factor to be at home. It's a big factor to be playing Central. It will be interesting how this translates when they go on the road, because we've talked about this in the past, year in and year out, that there have been times where Michigan has struggled or been a completely different team on the road. I like this schedule this year where they're alternating home and away, home and away, home and away, and you're not getting the month straight of home games. So I believe as we get through the season, they're going to be much better on the road. The question is, will they be better soon enough to go and face Nebraska? And, they're definitely expected to win, but when you see this dominating performance, right, you don't know, is this Michigan finding their way, or is this being at home and playing Central? And I think that's the big question when I look at this. I mean, if you listen to Bryce Underwood,
we're a dominant team. That's really what we are. There's no other way to put it. We're going to dominate every way possible. Whatever we got thrown at us, we're going to give back what we need to. So.
Okay. Hey, I like to hear that. I like to hear a player having confidence. And, we will be tuned in, but it's going to be interesting. And I think, when we look at the overall arc of the season, I'm wondering, is Central going to be an outlier, or is Central going to be a commercial of things to come? What do you think?
I think it's somewhat of an outlier. Not that, again, the fact that it's early in the season and you looked this sharp on offense is really great. But we still saw a few reckless decisions. Bryce still in the run game took a few hits that he probably doesn't need to take. There was one gang tackle with 3 guys on him in the middle of the field where it wasn't necessary. He was 3 or 4 steps past the first down marker, could have easily gotten down and not taken that hit. Those are going to add up, and we saw one really reckless decision where he let it fly on a deep ball when there was a crossing route at the first down marker that he could have easily dumped it off to, or just tucked it in the run and probably picked up a first down as well. So he's a freshman. Again, all of these criticisms come with with 10 times as much praise. He is really an amazing athlete and is showing absolutely tremendous leadership qualities. And Michigan is better with him at quarterback than anything that we saw last year. So, but the 2 weakest SP Plus teams on the schedule were week 1 and week 3 at home. It's a lot easier to get in rhythm and get comfortable in those situations. And Nebraska is really a hungry team and a hungry program. There's a lot of similarities between Nebraska and Oklahoma, I think, in terms of having to take a step forward, kind of having to prove in the 3rd year under Matt Rule exactly where they are as a program. And you've got a young quarterback there, and Dylan Raiola who's got a lot to prove in his 2nd year. So a lot of similarities, kind of a glimpse in the future with Bryce Underwood and Dylan Raiola, 2 good defenses, two medium, middle-ranked offenses, and young quarterbacks. So there's a lot of different potential outcomes. But the next game at Nebraska is going to look and feel more like the Oklahoma game than it does the Central game. But Michigan's going to play much better than they did against Oklahoma. And, we'll see where it shakes out when we start trying to make predictions. But to me, this game, this output, and the ease with which Bryce Underwood was pulling the levers against Central Michigan, that's more about this particular week in their comfort zone as opposed to what we're going to see going forward.
When I think about where we are right now compared to where I thought we would be when we headed into the spring practice, okay, I thought, and understand that heading into spring practice, we thought there was going to be a quarterback battle, right? We thought the opportunities were going to be divided. And what we had, because of injuries, Bryce got an accelerated development, okay? He got lots of reps because he had to, okay? And I remember thinking, okay, they signed Bryce Underwood, and no matter how great he is, they're gonna bring him along slowly. We had some experience coming back at the quarterback position. The popular thought was that, well, we got Mikey Keene, and he's probably going to start the season off, and they're gonna mix Bryce in, right? Well, Keene was injured in the spring. Bryce got a huge number of reps, which I think accelerated his development. And I remember during spring practice, folks in the media, hey, who do you think is going to be the starting quarterback, right? And I remember thinking, well, I don't think Bryce is going to start the first game, but I think he would be the starter by the Big Ten opener, right? I kind of saw like a gradual integration. So to come into the 3rd game and just see Bryce, and I want to tell people, I'm not a person to hype recruits or athletes, right? I'm very much a show me on the field, okay? I don't care how great you looked in high school. I don't care what your measurables are. I want to see it on the field. So when I was in Oklahoma watching the team warm up, and I'm looking at Bryce Underwood, if you had told me he was a third or fourth year player, I would have believed you. Okay. He has a swagger. He has an athleticism that I can't remember the last time I've seen this in a player this young. Okay. Now, of course, struggled against Oklahoma, but what you saw against Central was not surprising for someone of Bryce's talent and skill and confidence against a team that we should have beaten. And he did exactly what he did, what he should have done. So when we hear the players raving about him, when we hear the other coaches raving about him, right? These are people who've seen a lot of football. Okay, I've seen a lot of football. You've seen a lot of football, and I've said this before. Bryce is one of the most incredibly talented athletes I've ever seen at any age. Okay, now there's a lot that needs to happen for him to fulfill that promise to lead Michigan to a Big Ten championship, a college football playoff berth, hopefully a national championship again. But what you saw against Central Michigan was all the potential that everybody's been raving about. And to do it at home, perfect weather, and just Clint, you talked about the halftime score. How many times have we seen a Michigan team run up to halftime and then coast in the third and fourth quarter, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And again, coast for good reasons. Hey, let's get all the other players reps. Hey, we saw guys getting reps again. We talked about the participation report. And then, okay, let's not forget, we still didn't see Rod Moore yet, okay, who potentially could have come back in this game. They still said he was available and he didn't go. So the defense could get even better, and the offense may not be as good as what we saw against Central, but they will continue to get better, right? You were down 2 guards on your offensive line, and the offensive line looked amazing. And again, we'll keep saying it, it's just Central. But you know what? You got to beat the teams that you should beat. And Michigan did it in dominating fashion. So if playing for Sharon gave them a little more voltage, great. Okay. If Bryce being uncaged, unleashed, gave them a little bit of swagger, I like what I'm seeing. I really like it. And again, I'm not the person to beat the drum and tout how great a player could be. I'm saying Bryce is. And as he gets more experience, and again, like you said, he made a couple bad decisions. And I'll tell you, the struggle that I think they're going to have with Bryce is the struggle we had with JJ, okay? Where JJ was so good, he'd get a little overconfident, okay? And I think back to the TCU game where, there was a game that season where JJ said, yeah, there was a guy in position, but I just threw it through him, right? And he kind of laughed. Well, when you get to the higher competition, you're not going to be able to do that. And we saw versus TCU with the 2 pick sixes, you go up against equal or better talent, and those guys are gonna take advantage of any mistake you make. So what's going to be interesting as Bryce progresses this year is, okay, you could make some mistakes against Central and just out-athlete them, right? That gap is going to get smaller and smaller with every team in the Big Ten. And as the season goes, and like you said, if he's going to continue to run, well, when I would watch opposing quarterbacks, okay, and I think specifically of the Michigan State game where, you went to overtime and Braylon Edwards had the great game to bring Michigan back. Michigan State's quarterback kept running, and I remember being in the stadium like, go ahead, keep running. We're going to catch you, and we're going to pound you, right? And that's what happened in that game. So when you look at a running quarterback, it's not any individual hit. It's the wear and tear over a complete season. They will catch you, okay? They will catch you inbounds. They may catch you out of bounds, but somebody will catch you. And you need to be able to treat, a quarterback like Bryce needs to be able to treat his body like a resource, okay? And it is a marathon, not a sprint. And you need to conserve your body and conserve your health in that way when you're looking forward to the whole season. Especially, when you have a 12-game season, potentially a Big Ten championship game, potentially a college football playoff, series of games. Understand Nebraska is important, but it's just one game. And you can't be getting dinged up this early in the season. So I think one of the things the coaches are going to have to work on is rationing the running. Yes, you need to be able to show you can do it, but you don't need to do it all the time. And you need to be thinking like that. And that's one of the things that I think JJ really showed he was able to do in the national championship season here. And I think that Bryce is such an amazing athlete. I think those lessons are going to have to be learned much sooner.
Yeah, and the best compliment I think I could give Bryce Underwood at this moment, on top of how tremendous he's looked physically, is that all the feedback we get about his attitude and work ethic is just as glowing, right? That he's in there grinding film, he's paying attention in team meetings, right? He wants to understand the entire offense inside and out, and that is what is going to pay the biggest dividends, right? Physically, he's super gifted. He's going to continue to get bigger and stronger and faster. All of that's going to be great, but he's got the biggest room for growth in his mental kind of downloading of the scheme and seeing more and more situations and getting those repetitions is going to make his decision making and processing faster. And he's going to make better decisions, and he's going to make them quicker. And we've seen there's a big difference when he's decisive and goes. And I give Chip Lindsey, again, a lot of credit. It seems like they put a game plan in place against Central that allowed him to make quick decisions. Make your first read, make your second read, go. And when in doubt, use your legs, because at least then you're making a decision and taking the bull by the horns. And I expect that that kind of layering of the game plan to continue. So regardless of what types of plays they're calling or how many times they throw it versus run it, I think they are going to continue to let Bryce know that when in doubt, pull it down and go, right? And that kind of security blanket or safety net will help pay dividends, even against the better defenses, right? Because he knows if he feels pressure, he doesn't have to try to stand there and make a guess read or throw it into a questionable look. Just pull it down, use your athleticism to escape and make a play on the edge. And sometimes that is plenty to win a game. We saw John Mateer do that for Oklahoma for sure. And Bryce Underwood's fully capable of doing that. I continue getting better and better mentally with his processing. And by the time we get to the end of this season, as long as he can continue on that growth path, then Michigan is going to be really, really solid on offense. I think they're middle of the pack right now in SP+. I expect them to climb slowly but surely as Bryce Underwood continues to mature.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the umgoblue.com podcast. This is Phil Callahan along with
Clint Derringer.
Go Blue.
Go Blue.
I want to say this. What an odd day. Because this day was actually heartbreaking for me. Because, I have children that are Sharon's age. And we were texting last night, and just about how much he loves me and I love him. And it was a really hard week in our building, a really hard and emotional week. And I think what people that care realize that football is a game about relationships. And his players love him like you wouldn't believe. And what I would say today was you saw a love letter from 120 young men to their football coach today. And I think that's outstanding.
Thank you for listening to the umgoblue.com podcast. All rights reserved.